Where are you reps, good setters? Got me on the mic, now let's spill the tea. Talking courtside dreams from history. Legends on the blacktop now and then. From Wilt to Steph, we hit it again. Better chimes in, let's go deep. Young blood's rising, can't skip a beat. Puppy prospects with fire in their eyes. Draft night suckers and hoop dream highs. Wire to wire, bring the heat. Podcast magic can't be beat. Do better, we're go better. We're hoop heads, trendsetters.
What's poppin', y'all? It is your boy, it is Guard E3, and we are back with episode 29 of the N1 podcast. So we're creeping up at episode 30. Hopefully we have another 30, 300. We can keep this rolling for you. And of course, right next to me, the greatest co-host of all time, ladies and gentlemen, it is Mo Betta. Mo, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Look, we're hoops. We talk NBA. We talk WNBA. We get into a little bit of everything. But I'm well aware that more than a few people will be watching football tonight, and I totally understand, especially with the Chiefs and the Ravens getting into it. But, Brett and I think there's never a bad time to talk hoops, so let's get into it.
No, absolutely. So why don't we start this off like we always do for anybody who is watching this later, checking this out for the first time. We like to start talking about some underrated players of the week. So we think too many players are just getting overlooked or underappreciated now and in the span of history. So, Mo, why don't we start with you? You got an underrated player this week?
I do. This is like right down your alleyway. My underrated player who's kind of got swept up and lost in time this week is the great Sidney Moncrief. Sidney Moncrief, I would call him a combo guard, but he could run point. He could play the two. One of the great, and I do mean great, elite perimeter defenders in NBA history. A two-time defensive player of the year. I believe he won it back-to-back seasons. Sid the Kid was a bad man. Leader of that great Milwaukee Bucks team that was a perennial contender for about 7 or 8 years. Marcus Johnson. I believe Harvey Ketchens was there. Bob Lanier was there. They had a squad. But that was when the East was super deep back in the day, because now you're talking about Philly, you're talking about Birds, Celtics. Sidney Moncrief was one of the standout players in the 80s, and I think he gets swept up in time. That's why I brought him up. So I'm going to give Sid the Kid his flowers. Great two-way player, great leader, just a class act.
I completely agree with that. I think Sidney Moncrief just doesn't get as much love as he absolutely should. Just because, he never won a title. He never actually even made the finals. But his big flaw in the playoffs was he ran into Bird Celtics every year. He produced. That Bucks team played their hearts out every year in that stretch. The reality is the better team won every time. The Bucks were good. The Celtics were an all-time great team. And when you have to go through a team like the Boston Celtics and you start running into the Zeke Pistons, that's just a murder's row, man.
It is. What I remember about him, though, he was, obviously early in his career, so athletic, terrific at getting to the basket, had a nice mid-range. Like I said, he's just one of those guys that I enjoyed watch play. And you're right. Look, if you're going to hold not getting to the finals, if that's going to be your bar determining greatness, then there's a lot of guys that are already in the Hall of Fame that I guess shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. It's not easy getting to a finals. It's even harder when in your conference, two of the all-time great teams lie there. That Celtics team, come on, man. Bird at his peak, along with McHale, Parrish, the greatest front line in NBA history, Hall of Famer Dennis Johnson. Danny Ainge was a terrific player. They had Walton coming off the bench. They had a squad. Cedric Maxwell was there. It was going to be tough to beat anybody in that East with Doc, Sixers. Eventually, Moses Malone got there. And then you're talking about, like you said, Isaiah's Pistons coming up, and they took over the East. It seemed like every time Milwaukee was ready to make a move, another team stepped up and took over the East.
No, absolutely. And like I said, I wish that man could have, pulled it off and, got himself a finals appearance. But overall, I also can't blame him for not being able to do that. I got an underrated player of the week, and I think we talk a lot about Caitlin Clark when it comes to the WNBA, and she's gotten a lot of praise when we're talking about this winning streak that the Fever have been on. So my underrated player of the week is the rest of the Indiana Fever. I'm going with the team, and I give Caitlin Clark her flowers all the time, but mainly the one person I want to discuss that I don't think has been getting enough love, give me Kelsey Mitchell.
She's a bucket.
Kelsey Mitchell, since the All-Star break, almost 27 a game, 47% from three, 52% from the field. She's been an absolute flamethrower. Aaliyah Boston's been hitting from deep, too. She's giving this great inside-out game and great production. And you have another girl, Lexi Hall, has been absolutely fantastic since the break. She's also looking confident, knocking down shots. Lexi Hall's a girl who defends her butt off on every single play. So it was always questioning, like, man, if she could find a jumper, she'd just be even better. And since the All-Star break, she has found her jumper, as with the rest of that Fever team. So I love Caitlin Clark and what she's doing. And my underrated player of the week, Kelsey Mitchell and the rest of the squad, because I just don't think they're getting talked about enough in this run.
No, I like that a lot. Look, Kelsey Mitchell is actually, if you go about the second half of the season, she's averaging as many points per game as Caitlin Clark. Like she's been that good offensively. Not just with her shooting, Brett. She's taking people off the bounce, getting to the basket. Like I think, like I told Gene the other day, I think they found their identity. When the Fever can play up tempo, Brett, when they can play fast, they're a completely different team. They're fun to watch in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying she's Steve Nash, but she's kind of Steve Nash, like in the way she runs that offense. And they play up tempo. I think when they play up tempo, they become a completely different team, and they're a scary team. The question was put to me, could the Fever win a first-round series? And I said yes. No matter who they play, if they play at their pace, they're going to have a shot to win that series. The only way you're going to beat Indiana is you're going to have to slow them down and make them become more of a half-court team.
No, absolutely. And I saw an interesting take. When honestly, it got a lot of hate, but the way it was phrased, I don't think it's a wrong take. Somebody said, relative to competition, A'ja Wilson might be the best player in basketball.
By the way, I saw that take.
Yeah, and understand, we're not saying she's better than someone like Jokic or Embiid relative to the people she's playing with. Because the gap between someone like Jokic and Giannis, it really isn't that big. And even Embiid, he's right up there in terms of skill, just not health. The gap between A'ja Wilson and Brianna Stewart is big. And I didn't even mean disrespectful to Stewie, just A'ja Wilson has just taken this leap that I'm sure we thought she was capable of it, but I don't think people expected her to make this big of a leap. And she's just been otherworldly good this year.
She's a great player. She's a great player. So somebody disagrees with you. That I think they're a Stewie fan. I think he's a Stewie fan. Look, and by the way, Stewie's been balling. She's been balling. So that tells you something. When A'ja Wilson not only has separated from her, there is a gap between A'ja Wilson and the next best player in the WNBA, and that's saying a lot because Stewie is a great player. She is a bucket. She rebounds. She defends. It just shows you the elevation of what A'ja Wilson has done with her game, her skill set, her work ethic. Right now, she literally is head and shoulders above everybody else in the WNBA.
Yeah, there's a real chance that this year she's not only MVP, but she's also has a real chance to win DPOY.
Max.
So it just shows just how elite she is on both sides of the ball. And And like I figured we'd have some fun today, Mo, because this week has been great for me. I have this thing where, because I get told quite often that I don't know more than people who played the sport of basketball. And every week there's guys that help me prove my agenda that I might know at least somewhat close to them. And I think Pat Bev, we're going to start off with Pat Bev because this take is absolutely hilarious. So Pat Bev releases a list of top 5 centers in the MVP, in the NBA. So this list actually starts off really good. At number 1, Nikola Jokic. At 2, Joel Embiid. Okay.
Easy.
3, Anthony Davis.
Okay.
4, Bam Adebayo.
I'm still with you.
5, Ivica Zubac.
We talking about Big Z from the Clippers?
Yeah.
Look, I like Z, and he's a good complimentary player. Just a workmanlike player. He's going to give you 10 or 12 points a game, around 10 rebounds. A good player. But if the Clippers were a loaded team, I'm talking about a loaded team top to bottom, I don't think Z would start. I don't think he would start. Look, that take, if Pat Bev truly believes that Big Z is the 5th best center in basketball, it is a good example of guys that played the game at the highest level and were really good players, but that doesn't mean by default you know more about the game. Big Z is not the 5th best center in basketball. He's not the 6th best center in basketball, right? He's not better than Rudy Gobert. He's not better than Sabonis. Look, when Karl Anthony Towns plays center, he's not better than him either. I saw Isaiah Hartenstein get paid by the Knicks, but in the one season that I saw Hartenstein, I would argue he's as good or better than Big Z. I would also say Miles Turner of the Indiana Pacers is better than Big. I mean, I don't want to bang on Big Z. I think he's a good player, but I think it's a reach to say he's one of the 5 best centers in basketball. It might be a reach if I really think about it to say he's one of the 10 best centers in basketball, because I don't think he is. Not off the top of my head. I don't think so. Like Al Horford is, what is Al, 37 years old?
Yeah.
He's better than Big Z. He just is. He factually is a better basketball player, a better center than Big Z. I would say, look, I know he plays a different role in their offense and the way they run their team. Brook Lopez is a better center than Big Z. I don't even think it's close. It's just facts. I would say if you want to say it's close, but I'd give the other guy a slight edge because of his athleticism. I think Nicholas Claxton is as good or better because he's a lot quicker and a lot more athletic than Big Z. I just don't think Z's one of the top 10 centers. I don't have him ahead of Clinton Capella. He's not better than Clinton Capella. I don't know who there's no way he's a top 10 center. Maybe what Pat Bev meant was if damn near everybody was injured and there was just that many left, then he would be top 5. That makes sense. If everybody else was hurt, there was a rash of injuries at the center spot, maybe then you're telling me that there's a chance that Big Z would be 5. Maybe that's what he meant.
No, absolutely. Hey, what's good, Gene? Thanks for checking in. Definitely appreciate it. I know it's a football day, but never a bad day to talk basketball.
No doubt. Appreciate you, Gene. Again, yeah. It sounds like I'm banging on Z. I'm a fan of Big Z. I just think we need to be a little bit realistic. Like a guy who went to one of the worst teams in basketball, who was rumored to be going to the Lakers, who I don't think is one of the top centers, but he's better than Big Z. That would be Jonas Valanciunas. Big Z's not better than Jonas Valanciunas. He just isn't. If we went through the whole entire league, I hate to say this, more times than not, we're probably going to find a better center.
Yeah, that threw me off when he put him at 5. I'm like, how can he be the 5th best center, but not even like the best center in the state of California? Like,
there it is.
Like, what are we doing with that one? But yeah, no, I like Big Z too, but this one was a little too outlandish for me.
I see. You know what? Since you brought it up, that we have a lot of former players that, again, the advantage they have is they played the game, and maybe that's a lot of their knowledge is going to be. You don't know, you didn't play. That's fair if you're talking about playing the game and what you did in playing the game. In terms of commentating on the game and knowledge of the game, a good example. Shaq was on some podcast and he was asked who's the worst players in the NBA. And he said Rudy Gobert and Ben Simmons. And look, come on, man. He's only a 4-time defensive player of the year. That's 4 defensive player of the years that Shaq never won. Look, and I'm not saying in any way Rudy Gobert's on Shaq's level, but the guy is the best rim protector in the NBA. And I get that people want to attack him for his flaws. I like to point out that everybody that's one of the top defenders in the NBA, they get scored on. They get beat sometimes. There's some great defenders, but there's no one guy that somebody doesn't score on and get busy on. I just think that Rudy Gobert is low-hanging fruit for people to hate on because they'll say, well, look what he did in the regular season. And then they'll say, well, he didn't play as well in the postseason. And I go, well, he was only guarding the best player in basketball. Like, if you're guarding the best player in basketball more times than not, you know what's going to happen? The best player in basketball is going to get the best of you. The truth of the matter is, though, if you look at the actual numbers, Joker really wasn't killing him. They were showing the highlights, but actually, if you look at the splits, he actually was not. The numbers don't say so. It just isn't true, but the perception becomes reality because of things that have happened in the past. Shaq's a great player. No one can deny that. All-time great player, one of the top centers. He doesn't know the game that he's actually great at. He doesn't know what he's talking about when he talks basketball. He literally has no clue about the sport that made him famous.
Yeah, I hated that because to make it worse, it wasn't even the worst players in the NBA. You're talking worst players all time. And I'm sitting here like, what? Like, look at your Lakers, right? Like, you are on the Lakers, Shaq. Look at the Lakers. Let's look at some of their centers, and I'm pretty sure I can convince you'd rather have Gobert over a couple of these guys, like Rudy Gobert or Tarek Black.
Right.
Rudy Gobert or Robert Sacre. Rudy Gobert or DJ Mbenga. And I can go like even higher on the totem pole. And there's quite a few even good centers that you'd still take Rudy Gobert over because of his defensive impact. I think the flaw with a lot of these NBA players is there's just a lot of bias in their personal feelings because you played with them. You played a certain way. I saw somebody, he recorded every single time Rudy Gobert was targeted in isolation in the playoffs. Player shot 7 of 24 on him. The only guy that scored on him was Kevin Durant and like Luka Doncic were the only two that really got the better of him consistently on those 7 buckets.
Repeat those names again, by the way. So he had a hard time with Luka and KD. I'm just saying, who doesn't?
Say everybody else. He got out there and he threw up a contest. And it is, at the end of the day, it's low-hanging fruit. It's frustrating. And like in the Timberwolves series, a lot of Timberwolves Mavericks, everybody came after Rudy Gobert for all of the flaws of the Minnesota Timberwolves. But I watched Jaden McDaniels fail time after time after time to fight through any semblance of a screen, get himself trapped behind Luka, then force Rudy into 2v1, where he has to try to guard Luka and the roller. How many players in the NBA, even just in history, are going to be able to guard a Luka and a roll man 2v1? None. Maybe maybe some freak of athlete nature, like maybe Hakeem is able to stop it a couple times just because he's a freak of nature. Maybe somebody like Wilt somehow stops it a couple times, but even they wouldn't be able to do something like that all the time.
Right.
So, yeah, overall, that was just frustrating to watch, and it just pains me to see stuff like that.
I feel like a week doesn't go by where a current or former NBA player says some kind of crazy take. And usually the take has something to do with a great from the past in some kind of way. I don't know if you saw Gilbert Arenas on his podcast, but again, because they spend most of their podcast for whatever, they do the same old thing. They basically review Jordan versus LeBron, but they just do it in different ways. It's still the same subject. But this one was interesting because the case he was making was, well, Kobe wasn't that athletic and he wasn't that quick. Like Kobe Bryant wasn't athletic or quick. He wasn't more athletic than Michael Jordan. You could say he definitely didn't have Vince Carter's hops, but he was quicker than Vince Carter. There are a lot of guys who have hops and they just have hops for nothing. To say Kobe wasn't quick or athletic, I would tell Gil, go to YouTube, go and check out, type in young Kobe and tell me that's not an athletic player. Kobe has some of the most vicious in-game dunks in basketball, and it's every bit about athleticism. So I again, to me, that's a bad take. If you want to make the argument that Kobe's not as athletic as Michael Jordan, you can make that argument. If you want to say, look, Vince Carter can jump probably as high as Michael Jordan, but can he hang in the air as long? No, he didn't hang in there. Everybody's different. I just think it's a bad take to try to say Kobe Bryant's not athletic. And I would argue this. I would concede that Jordan was probably more athletic. And I think Jordan's the better player. But I think Kobe was more polished. I think Kobe was more skilled. That's just me. Some will disagree, some will agree. You know what? I posted this early this morning. It was, if you took Isaiah Thomas, the great Pistons, the Hall of Famer, and you took him at his peak and you put him in today's NBA, would his game translate to today's NBA? And most people, they were where I was at. They said it would translate. They didn't say he'd be the best player in the league. They didn't even say he'd be the best point guard in the league, but they believed that he would be one of the top 5 point guards, and I agree. But then you had a few people that came in there and made comments like, bro, it's not the 2000s anymore. And I'm like, clearly you're a casual. It's always the casual that uses the tagline casual. What the hell does the 2000s have to do with Isaiah Thomas? He played in the 80s, man. Maybe in the early 90s. What the hell are you talking about? I hate a person who comments who probably didn't exist when Isaiah Thomas played. How could you know? You couldn't have a clue. If your argument is, well, he's only 6'1", 190 pounds. He was 6'1" and 185 pounds in an era that was much more physical than today's NBA, and he shined. He was a monster. If he can play through hand checking and average 19 points a game and 9 assists, I have no doubt in my mind, with the way the floor is spaced, the way today's game is called, his numbers would actually go up.
And it's funny, if somebody wants to make that argument, I think my counter argument would be, yeah, and Jalen Brunson's a top 5 point guard in the NBA. He's 6'2", 190. So I don't know how much you value that extra inch, but he's the same size as Brunson pretty much, and with very similar weight.
I think Brunson's probably a little bit more, I guess,
Bulk.
more. Yeah, he's
Like
built
bulk
more like a
player?
safety. Yeah, I would say Brunson's probably got maybe 10 pounds on him, but that's not even the point. Is Trae Young some big physical imposing guy? No, he's not big and imposing, but he can put up numbers in this era because of the way the game. If the floor is spaced and you're gifted with your handle and you're quick and you can pull up or you can keep people on their heels, you're gonna be a bad man. Isaiah Thomas, would be a bad man. Not to mention, we don't talk about it a lot because there's other players who kind of get that moniker. You want to talk about somebody who has this big kilowatt smile that makes him seem like Mr. Nice Guy? Isaiah Thomas was a killer. He was a dog. He would feast in today's era.
Yeah, I remember I commented on that, and I think I said he'd be the fourth best point guard of. I think he'd be like the fourth best point guard of 2024. I think he'd be behind Luka, Shea, and I think the question is if you believe Steph Curry has another elite year in front of him. And then I think after that, I think that's where I'd put Zeke, like right after Steph. But honestly, that man would shine.
And I agree with that take. The only argument I would say with that one is I don't believe Luka's a point guard. I think Luka, just the same way I don't think LeBron's a point guard, even though he actually dominates the ball. There should be a different category. Luka, LeBron, James Harden, I don't know if they're point guards, but they're ball dominant. They always have the ball in their hands. But it's because it's not like on defense, Luka guards the other team's point guard because he doesn't. LeBron doesn't guard the other team's point guard because he doesn't. Same for Harden. They actually go guard a two guard, or they usually guard the guy that can't score at all. So I don't have a problem with him being fifth, and I'm not, and in no way am I saying Isaiah Thomas is better than Luka. Right now today he wouldn't be. So I don't have no problem with him being fifth. I think he would be one of the five best point guards, and we're talking about right now today. So right now today, obviously Chris Paul is on the other side of his career, right? It might be more interesting if we're talking about what if Chris Paul's in his prime, and we could go on and on and on. If we put all the point guards, the best point guards that you and I have seen, and we said all in their prime, you know what? I just came up with an idea. All in their prime, how would we rank them?
Who? All the point guards. Are we taking all the point guards for right now?
We're including them too. That's why it becomes tough.
Are we going all the point guards all the time, or just the ones we've seen?
Well, I want to do the cutoff that you and I do because I don't want to go all the way back. I don't want to go all the way back to Kuzia and them. I don't want to go that far, and that's not a knock. I just don't want to go that far back. But you can obviously you can include Isaiah, you can include Magic, you can include Jason Kidd, Gary Payton. We can include all those guys.
I do want to shout out, just because he was such a special talent and misses the cutoff. Shout out the Big O, Oscar Robinson.
The Big O's he's a bad man. You know what? Maybe I make a special exception. We'll put the Big O in there.
Ooh, see, that makes it even tougher. I love it.
You got. I'm gonna show respect. Let's put the Big O in there. Now, if you average for your career, I believe it's something like 25 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, or something to that effect, you should be in there. You should be in the conversation.
Let's see. Okay, so the greatest point guards in their primes. Okay,
and some windows obviously are shorter than others, but again, we're talking about everybody. I don't care if your window is a peak 5-year window or it's a 10-year window. Your peak.
See, that's tough because I think Steph Curry is the legendary, like 2016.
He has absolutely, and he's got an amazing peak, Brett. Matter of fact, I'm not so sure he's done. Like Steph is still playing like way up here, right?
I will say a lot of people say peak Steph Curry was 2022. I think he was even better since the start of the 2020s. Starting with that year where I think they got knocked out by the Grizzlies in the play-in, and they were all like, you don't want to see us next year.
Right.
People don't understand just how much of a Hercules effort that it was for them to even make it that far. If I remember correctly, I'm going to pull this up real quick. That depth chart was really, really bad.
Right.
Because I think that was the team where Jordan Bell was actually playing minutes. But look, honestly, I would probably put it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Somehow this team made the playoffs with. Yeah, there's Ken Bazemore, Jordan Bell, Marquise Chris, Damian Lee. I don't know how this team even sniffed the playoffs. Yeah, honestly, I would probably go, if we're doing greatest peaks for a point guard, I'd probably put Curry at 1. And then number 2 would be Magic Johnson. And I would have to include his 1987 season. I think 1987 was just peak Magic in general. I think that was his greatest season that he's ever had.
Yeah, I think that's when he kind of took over He had been averaging like 18 or 19 a game, but I think that year, I think Magic's averaging 22, 23 points a game to go with the 11 or 12 assists. Yeah, look, I have no problem with when again we're talking the peak. If I'm ranking them just all time in terms of their careers, I would have Magic number one. But if I'm talking about best peak, I have no problem with anybody saying, look at Steph's peak. I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. It becomes complicated, Brett, when we have to rank somebody like Kyrie.
Ooh, yeah. No, that Kyrie, I don't think he would make my list.
Really?
Kyrie had a good peak, but I don't know if we can rank him in like top 5 point guards of all time peak.
No, I wouldn't have him top 5. The funny thing about Kyrie, and maybe some will disagree. I feel that Kyrie is a point guard in the same way that AI was a point guard. AI wasn't really a point guard. He was more of a shooting guard than a point guard. I think Kyrie is he's a combo guard, but I think he's more of a shooting guard than he is a point guard. Matter of fact, we just talked about Luka. One of the reasons why Kyrie's not going to average 8 or 9 assists a game, you can't when you play with a ball dominant player. He played with LeBron for all those years. You can never lead the league in assists or even have 8 or 9 assists when you play with a guy that dribbles the air out the ball. It can't be done.
I think for 3, actually, just because you said we could include him, I think I put Oscar here.
I would not have a problem with that.
So.
Because I think Oscar was a more complete player than Kidd, a more complete player than Peyton. Nash is so unique that he kind of gets lost in the shuffle, but I would still give Oscar an advantage over Nash, just the size factor. Oscar was a legit 6'5", big, powerful, could get buckets in a way that Nash didn't really get buckets. But I think Nash sometimes he gets it's weird to say he's getting disrespected because the man's a 2-time MVP, but I don't think he gets ranked or treated like he's a 2-time MVP.
It's funny because if we're doing a 1977 like cutoff, and Steve Nash would actually probably crack my top 5 at that point, because I think my last 2 spots would probably come down to Chris Paul and Steve Nash.
It's interesting because I was going to go, I'm assuming Chris Paul's one of those guys. Right?
Yeah.
Chris Paul's got to be one of those guys.
I would say probably this is tough, right? Because Steve Nash has the hardware. He has the MVPs.
Right.
But Chris Paul was so special especially on the Hornets. That 2009 season, I think it was 08 when Kobe won his MVP, where Chris Paul was so good. There were legit arguments where people were trying to make arguments for Chris Paul, and I'll take Kobe as the MVP, but the fact that there were even arguments for Chris Paul just kind of shows how special he was that year. So I'll give him the respect. I'll go Chris Paul 4, Steve Nash 5.
See, that's hard because I'm with you on Chris Paul. And I was the one that brought up Steve Nash. But it gets tough because of Isaiah Thomas. It gets tough because of the kind of point guard John Stockton was. John Stockton was an old school point guard. The man wasn't going to score more than 14 points a game, but he was going to give you 12 assists. He was going to play all NBA defense. He was going to be one of the steals leaders throughout his career. I feel like he gets lost in the shuffle as well. Now, we did top 5. I guess I would probably do a top 10 that way. Stockton, Zeke, they would obviously get their shine as well.
I think with Stockton, my thing with Stockton is this: he's the most consistent out of them all. Like, you knew exactly every year, pretty much until the day that man retired, what you were getting from John Stockton. I think there are point guards for sure that like peaked higher than him, and I think he was a great player. And he would definitely be in the top 10. But I don't think he has like a great like top 5 argument over some of these guys. He's like for sure top 10, but I don't think peak Stockton it really tops the peak of any of the 5 guys I named. Plus, I think I put Isaiah Thomas over him, and then I think I hit Stockton like around like the 7th spot.
Right, but of everybody that's on the list, the closest guy to play point guard the way Stockton plays point guard is Magic. Magic was just bigger, obviously, and Magic could score more, but everybody else is more of a scoring point guard, and I don't have a problem with that because just like the game evolves, the position evolves. And you're right. The interesting thing about Stockton, Brett, is I like the way you use the word he's the most consistent, because I think what he was in his second season is who he was in his last season. You know what I mean? Like, he was literally that consistent. He didn't go up a notch. He didn't elevate, but you could book him 13, 14 points, 11 assists, 2 steals, shoot around 50% from the field, just under 40 from 3, high 80s at the free throw line. And again, one of the underrated perimeter defenders, point of attack defenders of all time. When Gary Payton and Kevin Johnson and guys like that give you your flowers because of how tough you were, it just goes to show you how underrated he was. Look, I wouldn't have him ahead of anybody that we mentioned, but I think if we're going to have a top 10, he would absolutely be in the top 10.
I am going to switch my list up a little bit. So I think my final top 5, I think I'm going to go with Steph, Magic, Big O. Then I think I'm going to switch out Chris Paul and Isaiah. I'm going to put Isaiah ahead of Chris Paul, and then I'll go Paul, Nash. So,
yeah, I could go either way with Isaiah and CP3. I'm going to give Isaiah the edge, though, because of the 2 championships and the finals MVP. But yeah, look.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, I'm going to switch them around. I'll put,
I'm with you.
And since I still like of the belief that Chris Paul had a higher peak than Nash, I'll put him at 5. And now one guy that definitely would make the list, and he just falls short of the 1977 threshold, would definitely be Jerry West.
The logo.
The logo is so good. A lot of people just talk about that losing finals record, but he was absolutely terrific in the finals. And you're talking about a guy that just continuously went up against the greatest defensive dynasty that we've ever seen and will never be replicated again.
And point out something to people when they go, Jerry West is 1-9 in the finals. Look who he's 1-9 in the finals against. He's literally 1-9 in the finals, Brett, against the same franchise. Do you know what I mean? Like you're dealing with, and I know it's a different era, but arguably, well, it's not arguable. He's one of the greatest defensive players of all time. Some guys who've played and watched the game longer than you and I would even have him number 1. Bill Russell was that guy. And Jerry West, he just couldn't get over that hump. It was tough. And Jerry West is unique. He absolutely has to be in your top 10 point guards of all time. It's weird because he is a point guard, but if you see him play, he's really actually more of a combo guard because he could shoot the lights out. And I don't mean shoot the lights out the way a Mo Cheeks or Stockton would. Jerry West is your point guard. He would also be your leading scorer.
Yeah, I'll say if I had Jerry West on this list, I think he would be 4. Like, he was that good. I would have him just behind, like, we're just talking about, like, point guard, how they played at their peaks. I think he's just behind Steph, Magic, Oscar, and then I think you hit Jerry West. I think he barely beats out guys like Isaiah, Nash, and
so we would put, if we redid the list, West is 4, Isaiah's 5, and then Chris.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if we're including Jerry West too, yeah, I think my top 5 would be Steph, Magic, Big O, Jerry West, and then Isaiah. And in that next tier, guys like Chris Paul, Steve Nash, John Stockton.
And where would would Jason Kidd make your top 10 or no?
Oh, that's tough because that man did have an insane peak.
Don't forget, the man at his very best took the Nets to the finals 2 years in a row. Was an MVP candidate.
I would say so. I would say next him and like this is a tough one, and I think it's a lot tougher than people think because of how explosive and exciting Russell Westbrook was. But I think Russ and Jason Kidd would be the next two, and I think there's a legit question and argument about which one would go where. Now, I think I would put Russ at 9 and Jason Kidd at 10. But I think that's more of a discussion than a lot of people would want to admit.
Yeah, look, the way I would view it is if we're just going peak, I think Russell Westbrook's peak was higher than Jason Kidd's. If you go, well, who had a better career? Look, by the numbers, it's going to be Russell Westbrook. But if you do the eyeball test, you and I both know Jason Kidd aged better than Russell Westbrook aged, because so much of what Russell Westbrook was all about was his freakish athleticism. And it's crazy because he's still a very good athlete. But what he isn't right now is he's not one of the 5 best athletes in the NBA. There was a time when it was either him or Derrick Rose that was the best athlete in the NBA. And Russell was just such a blur. There's nothing you could do to stop him. And now you look at him and he's still trying to play the same way he did when he was a blur, and he's not a blur anymore. And he never really adjusted his game over time the way Jason Kidd did. Jason Kidd realized I'm not going to be able to penetrate and blow by people as I get older. He developed a 3-point shot. He became more effective as he got older. Russ never did that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's always like Russ is like an enigma in a sense that he's obviously insanely talented, but his skill set just doesn't mesh with other good players. Like, really good as the lead guy, but he can't be anything other than the lead guy. And he cannot lead you to a title as the lead guy.
He cannot.
It's just a very interesting Russell Westbrook problem with that. But, yeah, we can't deny that peak Russ was absolutely insane. That 2017 season when he won MVP was special. I remember watching that last game where he secured it and the game winner to send Denver home. That was incredible.
My favorite Russell Westbrook would be young Russ, like those early years. I'm talking about the Westbrook when they went to their first finals in 2012. That was my favorite version of him because he was such a freakish athlete. He was so quick and so fearless. Like, if you go back and watch that series, the bottom line is the Heat won in 5. But if you go back and watch that series, it wasn't because Russell Westbrook didn't play well. It wasn't because Kevin Durant, all he did was shoot 50-something% from the field and like 48% from 3. It's not like he had a bad series. He did whatever he wanted. You can make an argument he should have shot more. That's how special those two were. But you made a great point. As gifted and as great as Russ is, he is an enigma because we can call him first ballot Hall of Famer. We can say he's one of the 10 greatest point guards of all time. Statistically, and I'm talking about just numbers. On numbers alone, he might be the greatest. If you just believe in numbers, his numbers might exceed everybody's. But he is an enigma, Brett, in the sense that for all that greatness, he could never be the best player on a title-winning team. Never.
Yeah, and like those early like Thunder team constructions were the weirdest thing ever. Like, I don't understand how this team and this shows you just how good Russ, KD were, because outside of them, this roster construction is just absolutely bizarre. Like this finals team, for example. So, we got a young Harden and Ibaka. Then after that, we got
Perkins.
Yeah, we got Perkins, Derek Fisher, Thabo Sefolosha, Nick Collins, Daquan Cook. there's just not a lot of spacing I'm seeing there outside of like Derek Fisher. They like tried to overwhelm teams with size and just physicality,
Right.
even though they had like the ultimate like guy to build like the most modern offense that we've ever seen in Kevin Durant around. They had such an amazing opportunity, and to see them kind of just squander it because they wanted to try to play like Steven Adams and Enes Kanter at the same time, and it's just unfortunate. Like that team could have easily had multiple rings if they just constructed their roster a little differently.
What an amazing core, though. Remember, they went to a finals where Durant and Westbrook, I believe they were 23, and Harden and Ibaka are like what 22, 21.
Yeah,
And do you know how insanely young that core is? That is insane. And like you said, they wanted to get bigger and thought they needed to be more physical. I would have made the argument because the league was shifting again that they could have went smaller. You could have played Ibaka at center. That I think they would have been a better team had they gone smaller. And I think that ultimately cost them because look, in the finals, what's the one thing that kept happening over and over again? Yes, LeBron was the best player, but Perkins couldn't guard Chris Bosh. Chris Bosh was just sitting out there in the perimeter eating him alive because Perkins can't play in space. And that was a mistake they made.
yeah, and it's not like someone like Steven Adams, as great as Steven Adams is, he can't play in space either.
Right. You know what?
Yeah,
With Steven Adams and Perkins, it just hit me, Brett. Steven Adams and Perkins, they would have made a hell of a WWE tag team.
yeah, no, absolutely. Let's say Perk would be perfect for the WWE. Like, he already talks enough trash.
He does. You got a mic
Right.
skills.
He could just be some big heavyweight bruiser that just beats everybody up. That would be fantastic. Now I kind of hope it happens.
He's already got the gift of gab, and I think Steven Adams could do the Brock Lesnar thing where he doesn't say anything. That would be awesome.
No, absolutely. I'll say it's funny we're talking about Kevin Durant and James Worthy. I think he said it once before and he did it again. Says Kevin Durant should be in the GOAT conversation. And here we go again.
I love James Worthy, by the way. When I was coming up, he was one of my favorite Lakers. That is a wild take. Kevin Durant is a great player. If you want to make the argument, if he won a couple of more titles, he would have a case to be in that conversation. But you can't be in that conversation for a couple of reasons. Even though I fully admit when he went to the Warriors, I believe he was the best player on those two championship teams. But he did, in fact, go to Steph Curry's team. Steph Curry is someone who may very well be in that conversation. I would argue, even though KD has all the physical gifts, I don't think all time, and you might disagree, I don't think all time he's ranked ahead of Steph. I think Steph's ranked ahead of him. And if Steph's ranked ahead of you, Steph's in the top 10. You know who's not in the top 10? Kevin Durant. If you're not even in the top, you know what? This is like actually one of the old opening of an and one. I was making that argument. You have to be in the top 10 to even belong in that discussion. Kevin Durant is not top 10 all time. And spoiler alert for anybody out there watching, barring him winning another title, he's not going to crack the top 10. Point blank. Full stop.
Yeah, I think he's top 15. I've always kind of had him in like around the 15th spot in that like Elgin Baylor, Kevin Garnett range. And he has all the tools to be a top 10 player of all time.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think that what kind of hurts him is just everybody in the top 10 led a team as the guy to win a title. Or at least like multiple, like KD has like multiple deep playoff runs, but he could never get over the hump as the guy. And you know, he
Yeah.
made his one finals appearance in OKC, but I think just the fact that I think mainly just not making it to the finals as the guy just really hurts him a lot in this discussion. So I know a lot of people argue about his bag and everything, but
this is not about his skill. This if everything is broken down into skill, then the people that think Shaquille O'Neal's a top 10 player, Shaq wouldn't be in the top 10 because even, and I'm not saying he doesn't have skill, but he'd be the least skilled person in the top 10. So you can't make everything about skill. It has to be more about not just your skill, but what you actually do on the court. Not just your skill, but what you do when you're playing against some of the better team. Not just your skill, but do you step up when it matters most, when you're the guy on your own team? KD was great in those 2 series with the Warriors. No argument. But when that happened, Brett, I felt like that was the most stacked squad of the modern era, right? Suddenly Klay Thompson was your third option. Like, you couldn't double off Steph. You can't double off KD. If you do, Klay's wide open. When they played Cleveland back-to-back in those series, the funny thing was Cleveland opted to not leave Klay, which I get, smart. But it allowed Kevin Durant to play one-on-one. Not so smart. I think KD's great. I think Worthy is reaching. If KD had never left, let's say he stays in Oklahoma City and he wins a couple of titles in Oklahoma City, I think that would have mattered more in the bigger picture than what he did with Golden State. And not to mention, it's not like he finished his career with Golden State. I think that also changes your arc too. Like if he had stayed with Golden State, if he stays with Golden State, Brett, if he stays with Golden State and he's part of that 2022 team and they win, like in a lot of ways, I think his decisions kind of hurt his career. Of course, KD has one of the greatest offensive bags in the history of the NBA. He might have top 3 greatest bags, if not in terms of talent and skill and efficiency. You'll get no argument from me. And yet you have to go out and play the games, and you got to be able to be the man in those moments. I remember when everybody was talking about KD's doing work, remember when he was on the Nets and him and Giannis are going back and forth. And the argument became, if his foot wasn't as big as it was, they would have won the series. And my reply was, but they didn't win the series. We can't go on if. They actually lost the series, and the Bucks actually went on to win the championship, I believe. So I can't get into the if was the fifth. We can only go on what actually happened. And then I look at KD, I think it was the following year in the playoffs against Boston, and they got destroyed. I think they got swept. They got destroyed. Next thing you know, where's he at? He's in Phoenix. And guess what? We just witnessed Minnesota destroy Phoenix again. I'm just saying, as great as he is, he's been getting it handed to him a lot in recent years. I would hope that the Kevin Durant story could end with at least one more great run. But my basketball knowledge and instincts tell me that that's not going to happen in Phoenix. It's just not. It's the wrong time to be in Phoenix with Minnesota being where they're at, where the Memphis Grizzlies are fully healthy, where the Mavericks are where they're at. And even though the Nuggets are diminished, I guarantee you they'll have no problem beating Phoenix in a series.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. If he would have stayed with the Warriors, then honestly, I think there's a real chance that if he stays in Golden State, they obviously still win in 2022. But I also think that even in like 2021, I think that was his first year back. That's the year his foot was on the line against the Nets. I think between him and Steph, they probably could have, because there was such a rash of injuries in the playoffs that year. Also in the West, there's a real chance that a Steph KD duo is enough to bring them back to the finals in the West that year. So, like, there's a chance we'd be looking at KD with 4 rings. And at the end of the day, deciding to go to Brooklyn and the Suns have absolutely killed him, because at the end of the day, they have shown that they're just completely inept at constructing a great team around him outside of that 2021 Nets year, which they couldn't get the job done.
Yeah, look, I think that's why so many basketball fans get caught up in the rumors about LeBron will go, maybe LeBron will go play with Steph, right? Um, would that pique my interest as an NBA fan? Absolutely, I'm a Laker fan, but if it happened, you don't think I'm not going to watch every Warriors game that I can watch? You're talking about two of the greatest players to ever play, and they're both still playing at a high level. I know people would. The argument would be, well, Golden State had to give up way too many assets. So you're trying to tell me that two guys that are on the other side of 35 are going to be able to make a deep playoff run? I actually believe they would make it. I'm not saying I'm not predicting they would win it all, but I think when you look at their talents and their skill sets and the way they complement each other, I think they would make a deep playoff run. I do.
I do too. I think just the big factor is just as long as they didn't give up too much, in the trade. If they let's say just swapped out, it would be a straight up swap, but if the main pieces, let's say they gave up Andrew Wiggins for LeBron without losing any major core piece, yeah, then that's probably still a playoff team.
Hey, wait a minute. I'm a Laker fan. If Rob Pelinka makes that trade, he's fired that moment. If you're going to trade LeBron to the Warriors, automatically the one piece that has to come back is got to be Jonathan Kuminga. Automatically. Now we can take Wiggins' contract with Kuminga, but if you're not going to give us Kuminga, I'm not trading you LeBron. I'm not doing that.
That's fair. That's fair. That would definitely be a fun duo to watch. Honestly, that would be like one of the most fun duos maybe of all time to watch, and there'd be a lot of fun duos to watch all time. But
it would. Look, if we're every now and then, us as sports fans, we get into these hypotheticals. In a perfect world, just for the fun of it, Brett, never mind who gets the bulk of the credit, but for the fun of it, would I enjoy KD, Steph, and LeBron being teammates over a 2-year span? I don't care what anybody say, the Stack Squad, whatever the haters, the detractors will say. I'm going to sit there in a game that's supposed to be a young man's game, by the way, and I'm going to watch three guys that are over 35 at least win one title. If they play for 2 years together, the three of them, they're winning at least one title. At least one title.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite, I remember one of my favorite what-ifs was the LeBron and Steph. And they're like, oh, who would win? It was like the 2023 Nuggets with Larry Bird or the 2016 Warriors if you added LeBron James both in their primes. I'm like, I don't care who the crap you add to that Nuggets team, they're getting washed.
I'm going to say it's not enough. It won't be enough.
You had multiple all-time greats to touch that. Because even if that team didn't have KD, you're telling me I get to replace Harrison Barnes with peak LeBron James, peak Draymond Green, Clay, Kurt, MVP, unanimous MVP Curry with Iggy in the death lineup?
I think I smell a three-peat. I smell a three-peat.
Yeah,
and that's without KD. I think it's a three-peat.
If they stay healthy all 3 years, I don't know if they lose a playoff game all 3 years. That team could be down 20 and just be like, oh yeah, by the way, guess what? Now we're winning by 30 by the end of the third. It didn't matter.
Yeah, like I said, it's one of those great hypotheticals. It's not likely to happen because so many things would have to fall in place. But would I love to see it, especially since I know that they're all three a lot closer to the end than the beginning? Yeah, you know that there's a changing of the guard, but do I want the old guard to make one more run? Yes, absolutely. These are not just Hall of Famers, Brett. These are all time of the all time, and they're going to all be walking away in the next 2 or 3 years. So yes, I would love to see them all make a run. Look, Luka's still 24 years old. Shai's 25. I'm just saying, the young dudes that we love to watch, they got plenty of time. John Morant, what is he, 23? They have plenty of time. Let the old guard take another shot at it.
No, absolutely. And it's funny, we were talking about him earlier, but Shaq also did make one more comment, and
Oh no.
this one kind of just annoyed me, right? He was talking about Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Mo, I want to read this to you, and I want to see how if you react the same way that I kind of did. Clark does everything right, Shaq said. I never spoke about her because Angel is my girl, but I can truthfully say Caitlin Clark is for real. I'm watching her play, and I'm trying to be upset, but she makes the right pass. She makes the right play. Girls try to beat her up, and she doesn't really complain. She's a great one, even early on. The part that gets me about that quote, and you can probably guess it, I'm watching her play, and I try to be upset.
Yeah,
And the fact he
that
goes,
was it. That's it.
I never spoke because Angel's my girl.
Right.
Okay, like multiple problems with that. First, like Shaq does realize you can watch Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark and still enjoy basketball.
Facts.
This isn't a one or the other thing. You don't have to pick. Like you can watch them both. And why? Like, why are you trying to actively be upset?
That's the funny part. That part right there. I'm trying to be. I get it. Angel Reese went to LSU. Shaq went to LSU. There's that whole loyalty thing there, whatever. And maybe they even know each other off the court. But the idea that I'm trying to be mad. That's the part that got me. I'm like, why are you trying? Why can't you just enjoy the basketball? Like you could say internally, I favor Angel, but I can't help but recognize how talented Caitlin Clark. They're both talented, but why can't you just watch them play and enjoy both of them playing great? And they play two completely different games because they play completely different positions. I love how people want to pit them against each other. I just enjoy watching them play. I've heard some older former WNBA players say that there was never anything wrong with the WNBA product. It just lacked promotion. I don't think that's a terrible statement. I think it's true. But I also think every now and then a player comes along, and that this is in the NBA, this is in the NFL. Every now and then a player comes along, and for whatever reason, people gravitate towards them, and they bring this huge swath of people to your game. That person right now in the current WNBA is Caitlin Clark, and there's nothing wrong with that. Because by the way, you and I we led the show with acknowledging just how great. Look, the league itself. When you go talent for talent, I think they have a lot of talented players right now. They do. But I'm looking at somebody like A'ja Wilson, and I'm like, come on, man. You know what I mean? Like, A'ja is so far ahead of everybody else. We acknowledge that. She's great. Caitlin Clark's in her rookie year. The great thing about basketball is we're going to watch her develop, add to her game. Maybe she takes another leap next year and gets even better, and so on and so on. Something tells me she will, because I think Caitlin Clark's a gym rat. And all gym rats do, everything is based around ball, right? Even in the offseason, she's putting in the time. A'ja Wilson's a monster. She just is, point blank. She just is. But we can appreciate the other talent out there. We can acknowledge the fact that for whatever reason, going way back to when she was in high school and in college, Caitlin Clark came to the WNBA with a monster fan base of her own.
I almost think that the emergence of Caitlin Clark has almost shown the problem with the WNBA. And it's almost like the issue of them not. They want to hold on to like the old guard and not really want to help usher in the new one, right? Like when Victor Wembanyama comes into the NBA and starts dominating, you hear all of his praises, all the the legends are like hyping him up. But Caitlin Clark comes in and she started off a little slow, but she really picked it up and starts dominating. And then you have legends and just pioneers of the game, like I'll mention it real quick, like Cheryl Swoops coming in and almost hating, and we've seen just in general, like these legends and pioneers of the game of the WNBA just come in and hate on her. Like Diana Taurasi with her whole reality is coming comment. Like, and that's the frustrating part. And honestly, the Taurasi comment I don't think was as bad as people thought, but I think it almost proves a point as to where the NBA, you see them like almost nurture and just help guide along these young players. Like the WNBA, they come in and immediately like jump on them and try to tell us how good they aren't. And like watch these lowlights. Like, why? What's the point? Let's acknowledge all these players and how great they are, and not try to tear every one of them down just to try to remember. I don't need to tear down Caitlin Clark to remember how great Cheryl Swoops was.
No.
I don't need to compare the two. Cheryl Swoops was an absolutely top-end, all-time GOAT debate candidate in the WNBA. There's no denying that. But I don't... So, like, why does she feel the need to take shots and then play victim? I don't get that.
It's weird, right? Because you brought up a great point that the NBA does a great job nurturing young players, mentoring them, propping them up, giving them their flowers, pushing them to try to be like. How many times have I've heard LeBron say it. I've even heard guys like Jimmy Butler say it, that this new wave that's coming in, these guys are going to be the torchbearer. Like they're acknowledging what Shea and Luka and some of these guys are going to do going forward. Tyrese Maxey is probably going to be part of that group. And they're actually celebrating it and hoping that it happens sooner than later, which is weird because on the flip side with the NBA, no major sport, not football, not Major League Baseball, no major sport disrespects its legends and disrespects their eras more than the NBA, and not all NBA fans, but a big chunk of NBA fans just are dismissive of great players. And the argument it's not even an argument. I would say that most of those people, you didn't watch them play. You didn't watch them play. You didn't take the time to watch them play, or you watched some kind of like blooper thing and said, yeah, well, that's why he's not this or that. I've never seen that. Babe Ruth played 100 years ago, and people still respect and revere Babe Ruth. They revere guys like Bob Gibson and Satchel Paige and people of that nature. And in the NBA, they kill Bill Russell. They call Bob Cousy a plumber. Hell, John Stockton played in the 90s, and they call him a plumber and tell you why he wouldn't be any good. I can't help it that John Stockton isn't muscled up and a freakish athlete. He's not a combine baby. He's actually a baller. And a lot of the combine babies who are freakish athletes, they're not ballers. They're just freakish athletes. They're actually not that good. I don't understand why you have to denigrate different eras. If you don't understand it, if you can't appreciate it, then don't speak on it. Don't speak on it. I have no problem acknowledging all the talented and gifted players that play in the current NBA. I can acknowledge that the game has evolved. I'm the first to say that when you take the average player in today's NBA, they're much better than the average player from NBAs of yesteryear. I believe that. I firmly believe that. But at the same time, it's too easy for people to go like even with the Isaiah Thomas thing that we were talking about earlier, that some of the things people were saying is like, well, he's only 6'1". How is he going to survive in today's game? And I'm like, he survived in an era where the game was much more physical, when it was hand checking and when guys knocked you down, the referees didn't blow a foul. They said, get up and keep playing. If he can survive in that era, you think he's not going to survive right now in the current NBA and Candyland? Of course he's going to survive. I actually think in this era, Isaiah Thomas is probably going to shoot 8 or 10 free throws a game, just on the quickness alone. Just on his quickness alone. I've heard people go, well, he's got to get a better jump shot because he wasn't a great shooter. I would argue that he was actually a lot better than his numbers say. But remember, he also played with hand checking. That absolutely impacted how efficient he was. He is going to be free of all that in the current NBA. I disagree with Isaiah Thomas on a lot of things. but I remember he was doing an interview. It was actually on ESPN, and they asked him what would he do if he were to be able to play in today's NBA. And he said, I would put up numbers somewhere between Steph and Kyrie. And I thought about that, and that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. What he's saying is he's probably going to average 24, 25 points a game. I agree with that. I don't disagree with that at all. Then factor in his basketball IQ and the fact that, like I said, don't let that smile fool you. Behind that smile, that's a killer. I just hate that not just certain swath of fans, but a lot of the current players. I heard Anthony Edwards, when he made the comment that he made the other day, he followed it up and said, well, I didn't even watch. So you didn't even watch them, but you had all that to say about how they weren't skilled or whatever. Like, why make the comment if you didn't bother to watch?
And that's kind of part of my issue too, when people are like, oh, well, these guys are so bad at dribbling because I'm watching a Bob Cousy highlight reel. I want you to watch a game of the 50s or 60s, right? And I want you to just watch the officiating, because if you want to understand the players, you have to understand the era. Like, if you watch the stuff that gets called for traveling or carrying and palming, there are times, there's a stretch where even if you move your hand from the top to even slightly on the side of the ball, carrying, turnover. So a lot of people think, oh, if I put like Jamal Crawford back in the 50s, he'd get burned at the stake for being a witch. When in all reality, he'd get nailed to the end of the bench because he'd just get called for, that in and out, sham god dribble, that travel, carrying, palming. And I'm not saying that he wouldn't eventually adjust, but if people think that someone like Jay Crossover, for example, like I said, I love that man. He's one of my favorite players of all time. But if they think that he'd just go back in the day and start, has he in it? That's not how it would work. And if you think that, you don't understand the officiating of that era.
You don't. And you don't understand, I would say, the physicality of that era. If you cut back door or went across the lane back in the, I want to say, late 80s, early 90s, you got a forearm to the chest and you would get redirected. And that wasn't a foul. That was a play on. That was part of the game. Try handling the ball at the top of the key with the guy your size or bigger than you, massaging your hips because that's legal. And when you try to cross him over, depending on how strong he is, he actually can redirect you and disrupt your handle. It's easy to say. I would tell all these dudes out here that think they know, go to your local gym and tell your friends or whoever you play with, you can hand check, you can palm, you can get up on me and see how well you play then. My guess is at some point you're going to be like, you're fouling me, and it's not a foul. Yep. If you've never played basketball at that level, how do you ever think you can judge it if you don't actually take the time to get to know it? It's not as simple as that. We can both acknowledge the game has evolved and how great it is to see a player like Joker, how great it is to even see a player like a Jason Tatum, a Luka, what Ant Edwards is starting to be, what KD and Steph has already done, what LeBron has done and continues to do. I love all that stuff. I do. Because I'm a huge fan of the NBA, and I just wanted to keep getting better and better. Nobody, and I mean nobody, Brett, wants Wemby to be what everybody projects him to be more than me. The same way I had that feeling when Tim Duncan came out. I was like, I hope Duncan is everything they project, and he was. Tim Duncan literally lived up to the hype. He might have even exceeded it. He was better than I thought he was in terms of his overall skill. And I think Wemby's going to be that guy. I think in another, not this year, but maybe the following year, I think Wemby's going to be an MVP candidate. I do. I truly believe that because of the things that he can do right now at 7'5", Brett. He's got an in and out dribble. He can cross people. It's insane. So don't think that I'm not a fan of where the game is going. I am. But just because it was in a different place, it was in an era where games were played in the 80s, or you might see a game that finished 83-78, it didn't mean it wasn't great basketball. It was a completely different brand of basketball. That's all I'm saying. Like, Isaiah Thomas and the Bad Boy Pistons won back-to-back NBA finals. And the hallmark of what they did was they played elite defense, but they also took advantage of the fact their era allowed a lot of physicality. If I took the Bad Boy Pistons and dropped them into today's NBA, I literally don't know how well they would do. I don't. Now, obviously, you and I could go, well, they would just constantly foul out, right? Because they wouldn't know how to play. I can't
Bill
put my hands.
Laimbeer's getting banned from the league in like
Right,
3 games.
right. How many times would Bill Laimbeer and Rodman and get thrown out? You'd lose count. But if you can make the claim that a team from today's era would quickly adjust to the physicality and the way the game is played in the 80s and 90s, then I would make the same argument that a great team, not just a good team, but a great team like the Bad Boy Pistons, I think they can make the same adjustment. It's not like Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Vinnie Johnson weren't special offensive talents. They were. Matter of fact, it's not that Bill Laimbeer wasn't actually a really good basketball player. Both things can be true. He was a really good basketball player, Brett. He was also dirty. He was a dirty player. He was.
I remember I've gotten into debates before defending Bill Laimbeer because people are like, Bill Laimbeer couldn't play in today's game. I was like, yeah, he could. I'll bet you money he could. Why? Because I see Brook Lopez playing in today's game. I think Bill Laimbeer could be a very impactful player in today's game, but impactful in certain matchups. Exactly
Right.
the same vein like Brook Lopez. His slow foot speed might get exposed if he's on the wrong team or against the wrong matchup, but put him in a situation where you give him really good point of attack defenders like Brook had with Drew Holiday and crew to help him out the past couple of years.
Right.
And watch the man be in DPOY conversations, and he can shoot from distance. So,
and he was a great rebounder.
Yeah, so I don't see why somebody like Laimbeer couldn't be impactful in today's game.
It's funny because I think that Laimbeer's his skill set. I think his skill set, never mind him if he's dirty or whatever, but his skill set, I think his skill set might translate better to today's game than say a Dennis Rodman would.
Yeah. I've seen Dennis Rodman's skill set in today's game. His name is Jared Vanderbilt.
That's a good point. And I'm not dissing Dennis Rodman. He's one of the great all-time defenders. He's a great complimentary star, but that's what he is. He's a complimentary star. I don't know. There's no way I could know that what he would do in today's era. I could tell you this. He's not leading the league in rebounding. He's not averaging 17 rebounds a game in this NBA, because in this NBA, whereas I've heard people make the argument defense is more complicated. I don't think they're more complicated. I think defenses react quicker because there's so much spacing. As soon as somebody creates a mismatch, Brett, what do? You react instantly, right? You have to if you get a big man put on a guard, because this era basically comes down to this. Very few teams run set plays. This era comes down to pick and roll, pick and pop, or drive and kick, right? That's it. That is this era of basketball. And I'm not hating on it. It's just what it is. Back in the day, if I'm guarding you and you're the two guard, Brett, and you tried to go over a screen, I went under it, I'm still guarding you. In today's NBA, a lot of the bigs can shoot to the point where if he sets a screen and I go with you, that guy's going to catch the pass and shoot, right? Like it's completely different now. Now they create mismatches, right? My big steps out and then the other guy dives. What happens? My big is sitting there trying to guard somebody like Steph one-on-one or trying to guard LeBron one-on-one. We all know how that's going to end. That's a big part of today's. I am not hating, but I'm just pointing out that's a big part of today's NBA, creating cross matchups and taking advantage of them. I have no problem with that. That's where the league is at right now.
Yeah, I think Dennis Rodman would be awesome defensively in today's game. I think the issue, and this is kind of where I said Jared Vanderbilt, is I feel like he has a very similar strengths and weaknesses as Rodman. Elite defensively, he's actually insanely good on the boards for his size.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
But offensively, you just leave him alone. He's just there offensively. He can get offensive rebounds. He's actually really good on the offensive glass too.
He is.
The issue is he can't do anything else on offense besides get offensive rebounds, and he's got some playmaking chops, but not enough
Right.
to really make him anywhere near a positive on offense. So I'm not trying to disrespect Rodman by saying that. I'm just saying that when I try to think of a Rodman comparison for 2024 and what his skill set might look like, that was just the first name to pop into mind.
But you bring up a good point. He would be guarded completely differently because he actually wouldn't be guarded. It would be 5-on-4. And yes, everybody and their mom knows if Dennis Rodman run towards the restricted area, it's because the shot is going up and he's trying to get a rebound. But other than that, you're going to play off him. Somebody's getting doubled because you're not guarding Dennis Rodman. Matter of fact, you're trying to double that person and make them make the right basketball play and pass it to Dennis Rodman, who's wide open. What is he going to do with it? He's not going to do it. He's going to shoot, miss, and you guys are going to get there. Like, that's where he would struggle in this era. I think you're right. Defensively, he would still be a great defender, but I think offensively, he would hurt his teams in a lot of ways because he's just not effective anywhere other than the restricted area. And it's not because he has a post game, because he doesn't have a post game. He was just a really good athlete who had terrific timing. Like, he's one of the great instinctive rebounders I've ever seen. No argument there. But I don't think it plays out the same way because of the way the NBA is played right now. It's played a lot faster. It's played with more space. I think in this NBA, would he be effective defensively? Yes. But I think in this NBA, Brett, I don't think he starts. I think he's a situational player.
No, absolutely. And, it's ironic, Mo. We started the show with Caitlin Clark. The last thing I want to touch on is Angel Reese. And I want to do something that a lot of people seem to fail to do, is the context. A lot of people like to bash Angel Reese at this point because it's the cool thing to do. She can't finish around the rim. And I want to start by acknowledging that she does have some things to work on, and she said so herself. And one of those things is just touch around the rim. But my question is this, Mo. How come we're not giving the front office more blame for this whole situation? And let me explain what I mean by that. In the draft, you draft Camila Cardoso. Move, my bad. And you draft Angel Reese. You're going to run this two-big system where both bigs just don't shoot the ball.
Right.
So, okay, that's easy. Let's go get shooters. Now, Marina Mabrey, as we know, before the season, she requested a trade, said she was done with the Sky. So they kind of had to, get rid of her. But the failure to just get any semblance of shooting around these two bigs, like, just stop and think about that one for a second. Like, do you think that might be part of the issue as to why she can't finish if you're trying to finish in a lane with three people in it?
It's
every time, what's the average 3-point shooting percentage nowadays? Like 36% around there?
Yeah.
Guess how many Chicago Sky players are over 36%?
I'm going to say none.
You're actually pretty close. It's 2. Dana Evans, she's at right at 36%. She's at 36.8%. And Michaela, I cannot say her last name. I am terribly sorry. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm not going to try to. I'm not going to butcher it. But she's shooting 40% on 1.5 attempts per game. So we have two ladies that can shoot from 3, just not on any semblance of volume at all, but they can step out behind the line and hit it once or twice a game. Cool. Guess what? That's the same thing I criticize Evan Mobley about. You can shoot the ball once or twice a game behind the 3-point line, but defenses aren't going to respect that. They don't care. As a team, they're shooting 31% from 3. And we start going down the list because after that 36%, the drop-off is hard. Rachel Bannon, 33%. But then we're at Lindsay Allen right after it. This is the 5th best shooter on the team. 4th best shooter on the team. 29%. Like, once we escape the top three, they don't have anybody shooting even 30% from three. So I think this is just terrible failure. Not only just in general, like we can talk about what improvements need to be made, but I don't know how you don't go into the offseason and draft two bigs and think we should probably get some more shooting around them, and they just failed to do that. And now the lane's clogged, and the only one who can make any semblance of anything happen is Carter. Kennedy Carter's been fantastic for him. She's been an absolute godsend because without her, that offense is just terrible. They can't get anything going. So I think the Angel Reese hate is just overblown because A, she's a rookie, she's still developing.
Right.
But B, this front office decided to take a two non-shooting bigs and just try to throw the worst possible roster around them. And not to mention, there's another rookie that really should be at blame for all this. Witherspoon. Now I get it. She's a rookie head coach. She's got time to learn. I'm not saying fire her this offseason. But she's doing a lot of the same things that people criticize a rookie Darvin Ham for doing in his rookie year, but she's doing it worse. I watched the Fever are on a 10-0 run. Hands are in the pockets. We ain't calling a timeout. They can figure it out on the court, but they can't. The rotations are whack. And I get it. She don't got a lot to work with right now in terms of offense. But I don't think that Angel Reese and I don't think they can really play together quite yet. At this point, let it run. The rest of the year, you're not going to the playoffs or anything anyway. But just all year, like we're talking whack rotations, just doesn't really know when to call timeouts, and that'll come. But it's frustrating to me as someone who tries to look at everything with all the context. Just watch Angel Reese get every ounce of this blame when, in all reality, there are just so many things wrong with the Chicago Sky team that really just don't even involve Angel Reese. Like, she's probably like the 10th thing on, like, she's probably like towards the bottom of the importance list in terms of things wrong with the Chicago Sky. She's at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, it's not her. Right. Or Cordova.
So, like, one thing I would love to see, like, her and I ran myself out of breath with that rant. I'm sorry.
I love it. I love it.
One thing I'd love to see her and Cardoso work on is some high-low passing. I think that's going to be a must for next year. And I'm not even saying, like, you have to pass like Jokic and Boris Diaw or any high-level passer like that. I think a perfect duo to watch would be Tim Duncan and Tiago Splitter. Neither of them were really amazing passers, but they perfected all the passes that they needed to. But I think most importantly this offseason, go get shooting. Even if it sacrifices your defense, or at least some of it, I don't care. Go get shooting. And if you're watching this, stop pinning all the blame on Angel Reese. She is not the problem with the Chicago Sky. She's at the bottom of the list of things wrong with the Chicago Sky. You want to say she's stat padding. Okay, well, guess what? It's the coach's job to pull her out of these games. So why isn't she? Is it Angel? Angel Reese is just in the game, and she's going to keep going as hard right to the finish line. She's a competitor with a high motor and high intensity. So you're upset with Angel Reese for stat padding when it's the coach's job to pull her out of the game. When she's on the court, it's her job to play. You're upset because, she keeps shooting a lot. Okay, who's drawing up the plays? And Angel Reese ain't calling her own number a lot of the times out there. Coach is drawing up plays for her. I think Angel Reese does need to work on her playmaking a little off these offensive rebounds. But to sit here and try to say that the biggest issue is Angel Reese playing as hard as she possibly can every second she's out there, like, it's just insane to me, and I absolutely hate it. So I'm a guy that likes watching both Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, and I think all this Angel Reese criticism is just asinine. It's just regurgitating talking points you saw on Twitter or you saw on these low-light reels, and you just copy and paste without really actually watching the game or trying to pay attention as to what's really wrong with the Chicago Sky. This is a team with a rookie head coach who doesn't know what she's doing yet, and a team that has absolutely zero floor spacing. So I don't care what big you throw in there. Asia Wilson would probably even struggle if you threw her on this team with absolutely no floor spacing and they could just pack the paint with 5 players. It doesn't really matter. And I'll just cap it off by saying, just let's start looking at the whole situation and not just regurgitate Twitter points on these kinds of things. Angel Reese is not the problem with the Chicago Sky.
Nah, look, I couldn't have put it better. I remember draft night when they drafted both of them. The first thing I said is they have the same skill sets. That even though Angel is better, but they have similar skill sets. I didn't understand why they needed both of them. Look, even with one of them, you would be doing yourself you're doing yourself a disservice by not going out and pursuing talented wing players. Players who can beat you off the dribble as well as shoot the basketball. You have to complement your bigs with people who can get them easier looks, with people that can get them in their sets and set them up for success. Yes, Angel Reese has to work on her ability to finish at the basket, but she struggled with that in college. I think she will continue to get better. I actually think that one of her biggest problems when she's trying to finish in the paint is I think she rushes her shot too fast. Like she'll snatch a rebound and rather just going up strong, she rushes her shot. I think she's got to slow down a little bit and just go up stronger and she'll finish better. I don't think that's something that she'll have a problem correcting. But you're right. If the Sky are ever going to be anything, since you've already committed to these 2 bigs who are talented and young, you have to go out and surround them with not just shooting, but players who can make plays off the bounce. Because if not, you will be a bottom dweller. But you're right. Angel Reese and Camilla are not the problem. They're not. They're. I think when you watch them play, they do everything in their power. Those 2 both leave it on the floor. I just think it's a team that doesn't have a lot of talent, and I get it. Witherspoon is a rookie coach, but I don't know if she's coaching them more than she's just yelling or complaining. They might need another ear to listen or someone to listen to other than Teresa Weather. Maybe she's just not ready to be a coach. Not everybody that played the game translate to a very good coach. That's not the way it is. I'm an Angel Reese fan. I'm a Camila Cardoso fan. I think in the end, they pick 2 players who will help turn the franchise around. They have to go out. I'm talking about the front office, and they have to find a way to bring in more talent on the outside to balance out their bigs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. We were actually talking about Angel Reese and not Angel. We were talking about Angel Wilson in one of the Discords, and it was an interesting question. It was, which NBA player is her player comp? And it could be all time. And the first name that came to mind for me, and I'm sure you've watched enough Angel Wilson to know if I'm full of crap or not, but the first name that came to mind for me, David Robinson. The way she dominated on both sides of the ball, has an inside-out game, and also is just insanely quick for her size.
She is quick.
Her feel just reminds me of David Robinson, a lot of D-Rob. If I had to pick an NBA historical player comp,
that's not a bad comp.
Nowadays, and then they asked, what about modern? And I was like, oh, it's tough because it's maybe peak Anthony Davis. Davis has a lot of that too. Joel Embiid's too slow to really draw that comparison. And
yeah, I like the David Robinson Anthony Davis comparison. I would argue that she's actually a little bit quicker than David Robinson when she attacks the basket. She's a little bit better off the bounce than he was, but I think that's a good compare. I think I think what she does falls right between D-Rob and AD. I do. I like those comparisons for her because when AD's at his best, his mid-range jump shot is falling. And when his mid-range jump shot is falling, he's almost unguardable. I guess we got technical difficulties. So since Brett is out, I know it's football tonight, guys. I know it's football tonight. I don't know the score of the game, but as soon as and one wraps up, trust me, I'm going to hop on the screen, catch up with Pat Mahomes and the Ravens, and see how that game is playing out. What I'm excited about is this coming NBA season. The moves that were made in the offseason, when you look at the Mavs adding Klay Thompson, when you look at what the Sixers did in the East, what that trio could potentially be, a Joel Embiid, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey trio. I'm of the belief if the Sixers are going to be a legit title contender, I think Tyrese Maxey has to be the focal point throughout the regular season. I think you have to find a way to rest both Joel Embiid and Paul George and ride Maxey through the regular season and then unleash George and Embiid, a fresh George and Embiid in the postseason.
Sorry about that. My internet cut out for a minute, so I kind of disappeared and came back. So
now you're fine. I was just ranting about what the Sixers could be.
Well, that's fair. That's all I had for us today. Before we get out of here, Mo, you got anything you want to add?
No, just appreciate everybody. Love doing and one with my guy Brett. We'll be back next week. Thank you guys for tuning out and tuning in. Make sure you check out all the great content we have with the Wire to Wire Network. Wire to Wire Network. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you check out the morning show, Coffee and Sports in the Morning tomorrow, 8 a.m. Central. We'll see you.
Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Sorry for that last minute of technical difficulties, but we'll be back next week. I'm looking forward to it. Until then, everybody, enjoy your first weekend of real football. That's back. Enjoy the morning show. And next week, I'll have plenty of great stories to tell because I'm going to AEW All Out in Chicago this weekend. Awesome. So let's all have a great weekend and enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you for tuning in to the And One podcast. If you like our content, you can find more on the Wire to Wire Podcast Network on YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. Want more And One? Find it on Wire to Wire. Like and share our Facebook page and join the And One Discord. Grab the link to join from our Facebook. Thank you for tuning in and have a wonderful day.